County Flats, it's not there anymore, was serviced by somebody in Phoenix. And so what they found out was these people who serviced the cameras were getting 50% of the fines.
Ah, interesting. All right, I think we're live.
Okay. Call the meeting, the July 25th meeting of the Town of Abingdon Planning Commission to order. I want to welcome everybody who's here to the regular meeting of the Planning Commission of the Town of Abingdon. We appreciate your input, encourage public participation. Your comments are important to our decision-making process. There'll be two opportunities for anyone to address the commission. The first opportunity will come at the head of the agenda, where we call for public comment on issues not on the agenda, and the second opportunity will be when we have discussions of specific topics, whether they're certificates of appropriateness or public hearings. When anybody who wishes to address the Planning Commission should approach the podium, give your first and last name and your complete physical address. Comment should be limited to 3 minutes. Roll call.
Ms. Quetch? Here. Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
Mr. Pennington? Mr. Sproles has an excused absence. Mr. Wilson?
Here.
And Mr. Schuman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. The next item of business is the approval of minutes from the regular meeting of June 27th, 2022. They're in the packet. I did not see them attached with my email, but has everybody had an opportunity to review them? Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as submitted? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll move that the minutes be approved
Okay.
as submitted.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. We'll call the roll.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Abstain. I was absent.
Correct. Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schuman?
Aye. All right, next order of business is public comment. I don't know if anybody signed up or if there's anybody who wishes to make public comment on issues not on the agenda. If not, we'll move on to what will be a public hearing for a special use permit, HGBG LLC, David Brown, 155 East Valley Street, Abingdon, Virginia, 24210, owner, Matt Bundy, Bundy Architect and Engineering, Inc., representative, special use permit for conversion of the second floor space into multifamily located at 155 East Valley Street, Abingdon, Virginia, 24210, tax map, parentheses, 012-1-40 in parentheses. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing staff report.
Gabe's going to give this one tonight.
Okay.
Christopher, Town of Abingdon. So yes, the request is from David Brown of HGBG LLC, and Matt Bundy is the representative. They've requested approval of a special use permit per section 15-9 of the Town of Abingdon zoning ordinance to convert a portion of the second floor, the southern corner, to multifamily located at 155 East Valley Street, Abingdon, Virginia, parcel 012-1-40. The property is currently zoned limited industrial District of I. So background, the structure currently is utilized by a variety of businesses as office space. Their application states to renovate second floor into multifamily spaces, specifically the southern corner of the second floor. The only change to the footprint of the building will be 2 elevated balconies located on the south-facing elevation. The remaining sections of the structure will continue to be used as office space for businesses. Access to the site will continue to be Food City Circle. The adjoining properties are zoned office and institutional OI, residential R3, and old and historic to the west. A parcel adjacent to the northwest of the corner of 155 East Valley Street has its eastern half zoned OI and its western half zoned R3. Primarily, an OH parcel sits adjacent to the west of 155 East Valley Street. The adjacent parcel to the north and east is zoned office and institutional, OI, and the properties to the south are zoned Old and Historic District. The topography of the parcel is relatively flat, and this is located with a general slope to the west. The parcel is located on a slight hill directly behind structures fronting East Valley Street. So some staff findings regarding the area regulations. The parcel size can accommodate the request is roughly 33,000 square feet. Staff findings regarding the height. Buildings may be erected up to 35 feet in height. The only exterior aspects concerning the conversion of the south corner of the second floor into a multifamily space are the two doors installed into the south-facing elevation, leading out to two newly constructed balconies for each apartment space. All other aspects of the project will be located in the interior of the structure, thus not altering area, setbacks, frontage, yard, or height regulations. Staff suggests conditions of approval. If the Planning Commission decides to approve the special use permit request, staff suggests the following conditions of approval be attached in order to secure substantial protection for public health, safety, and general welfare. Submittal of all applicable building permits to the Community Development Department to ensure compliance with the VA USBC for construction permitting. And then, if you can see on the back in your pack, you'll see the plans, the site plan, and also the architectural drawings. And then we had a response from the applicant, just concerning how it fits in the comp plan and everything. So it says, Dear Mr. Christopher, pursuant to the owner's request, we have prepared preliminary plans for the conversion of a portion of the existing two-story office building into multifamily residential consisting of 2 apartment units. Other portions of the building will remain in their current use as office space. The current zoning for the property is office institutional, OI, and the Town of Abingdon zoning ordinance lists multifamily housing as a special use in the zoning district. From the comprehensive plan dated 8/28/2020, the following community goals are stated. From community goals, Abingdon in 2040, a town of complete neighborhoods. Abingdon will have a thriving downtown and will be known for more than Main Street. We will have district neighborhoods with a mix of land uses, allowing people to learn, play, and work near their homes. A connected, walkable, and bikeable small town. Abingdon streets will be well-connected, well-served by public transit, and safe and inviting for pedestrians and bicyclists of all ages. And everyone will have easy access to nature via an extensive trail network connected to the Creeper Trail. The requested special use of multifamily provides mixed land use in this property by converting an existing partially vacant building into residential, while the remaining building is office space. It is in a location that is walkable to town parks, businesses, and amenities. With respect to the impact on adjacent land uses, the proposed use of multifamily residential would reduce the potential traffic in the area from the existing use of business and would not create unusual noise, light, dust, odors, or fumes. The adjacent uses are single-family residential and office commercial, and this small-scale multifamily change would not have a significant impact on the uses. And that is it. If you have any questions, I'll stand by. If not, I'll move to the side and let the applicant.
First of all, let the record reflect that Mr. Pennington is
Sorry,
with
my
us.
apologies.
And anybody have any questions?
Have we received any correspondence from any of the adjacent property owners? KVAD, Cumbos, anyone?
No, we've just received that from Certified Mail that they've got the letter and they signed off on it. So we have not received any kind of written response back.
Other questions? Is there anybody else here to speak for the particular proposal?
Matthew Bundy, 190 East Main Street, Abingdon, Virginia. I'm a representative of the applicant. I guess just to reiterate what he said, he kind of explained everything and read the letter, but this is an allowed special use for this zoning, and so Like the main thing is to show this is compliant with the comprehensive plan. It does provide mixed-use building, which is the idea of what we want. It's a nice infill of property that's not being used right now. And then also it's very walkable. It's, less than a minute walk to most amenities in Abingdon. So, do you all have any questions for me?
Any questions for Matt?
Is Food City Circle a public road?
It is not.
I didn't think so.
It is a drive, because we just recently dealt with somebody who was looking for a access through that. And so they got an access through this property and through, that, which, as a private drive. Yes.
Does that have any impact relative to setbacks, anything of that nature?
No.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Matt. All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at this time and ask if there's any discussion from the members of the Planning Commission, or if there is a motion.
Well, I'll move that we approve the request for special use permit as requested.
Do you want to add the suggestions from the staff as to the what they have to submit, the additional information? That is-
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so the motion is to approve the request for special use permit to convert the second floor to multifamily use. And then we need to say that it meets the requirements of section 19-9-6 of the Town of Abingdon zoning ordinance.
All right.
Is that what you're referring to?
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right. Any additional discussion? All right. Ms. Price, if you would call the roll.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Pennington?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
Aye.
And Mr. Schuman?
Aye. All right. The next order of business is a public hearing regarding a special use permit, Debbie Evans, 327 Oakland Street, Abingdon, Virginia, 24210, owner. Debbie Evans, special use permit to build house in flood zone located at the corner of Blacksfort Lane and Court Street, tax map, parentheses 013-7-1, in parentheses. I'm going to open the public hearing and ask for the staff report.
Okay. So Debbie Evans is the owner, as you mentioned, and she's requesting an approval of a special use permit, and this is per section 15-9 of the Town of Abingdon zoning ordinance to have a home in the AE flood hazard district. This is located at the intersection of Blacksfort Lane and South Court Street, and currently the property is zoned B1. So let's just pull up the. You all may recognize that we had a similar one a couple of months back. It was called the Clink, and they were looking at also doing work inside the AE flood hazard area. Essentially, what happens when we get a request like this is that we ask them to submit an engineering plan. So we want to verify that an engineer has actually reviewed the plan and has indicated that what would need to happen for it to be allowed in the flood zone. So this property contains 0.1 acres. It's currently vacant. It would be a new structure, and so they did have to submit the special use permit. We have B1 adjoining it to the north and west, and then we have limited industrial and R3. The parcel is relatively flat with some slight slope. So many of you might know that our town engineer Tyler Vinsel is currently still continuing some partial duties. So when you see that in here, it's not incorrect. He's just on a more part-time basis for us. So he did a review of the information that was provided to make a determination that, one, this does need a special use permit. A couple of the things that I'm just going to put on the record that are important here is 15-9-3, site plan and permit applications. All applications for development within any floodplain district and all building permits issued for the floodplain shall incorporate the following information: the elevation of the base flood at the site, the elevation of the lowest floor, including a basement. For structures to be flood-proofed, that's for non-residential only, the elevation to which it would be flood-proofed, and D, topographic information showing existing and proposed ground elevations. And one of the key reasons that we look at all of this information is in 15-9-4, which is on page 5. D, it says encroachments including fill, new construction, substantial improvements, and other developments are prohibited unless certifications such as a hydrologic and hydraulic analysis with supporting technical data is provided demonstrating that encroachment shall not result in any increase in flood levels during the occurrence of the base flood. So you probably saw in your packet that they did submit a flood report. I'll just pull that up here. And if you look through it, they indicated that the drainage, it says the drainage way impacted in Town Creek near mile 2.3 between tributary 1 and tributary 2. This was a detailed study of that area. And they found that the base flood elevation was 2,039. The base flood elevation at this property is 2,038.6. So it's a pretty small impact in elevation change between where the property's BFE is and where the BFE for the study area is. So to limit the impact to the base flood elevation, the structure is to be constructed on posts with the main floor elevated a minimum of 2 feet above the base flood elevation. In this study, they indicated a 1 foot wide post spaced at 10 feet center to center with a total length of 50 feet. That's what was put into the model, and that also included a 4 foot wide stairway. So those are the things that they put into the model when they're looking at whether or not, if there was a flood in this area, would there actually be impact to the floodplain. It's not necessarily would the house go away, but would, by building in the floodplain, do you actually affect where the water's going? So that's what this analysis is really taking a look at. And so they submitted that, and Tyler reviewed this report, and he found that with the support of the building permit application, this information that was provided is enough to allow this project to go forward, if you all choose to. Now, I know we have an engineer on our staff, an engineer on our planning commission, so if there's any additional questions, you might want to direct them towards him. But yes, from our town engineer, he indicated that this would be fine. So with that, the applicants are here to discuss the project, if you'd like to speak to them as well.
If you have something you want to add, we'd certainly be happy to hear it.
I'm Debbie Evans, the owner, by the way. I'm just trying to build a small home on this lot that I've owned for several years. Matt and I had discussed the elevation. I actually shot grade to see how it would make it level with Park Street to make sure that it would be in a flood impact. I just want to build a small 28 by 32 home, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, just for me. And like I said, we had discussed doing the 6 by 6 post and doing the same thing for brace to make sure they'd be in this way on the home, since it would be sitting up off the ground. So.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Evans? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, do you have anything you want to add?
Matt Bundy, 190 East Main Street.
We just hate to have a meeting without hearing from you.
Thank you. Feels so great. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think she explained it pretty well. If we did drop the 6x6 post, which we were talking about, that would be conservative by my report. I used 12-inch just to make sure that we were covered.
I'm highly confused about the whole thing. First of all, it's this, a few months ago when the clink came in, they weren't doing anything outside the building. So it has nothing to do with what's going on here. This is all outside. Where is this building going on that lot? I assume as far up towards the street as possible.
It's pretty far up towards the street. If you go
What would be better, your report or
Yeah, my report, there's
Okay.
a page in there that shows the house.
right here?
Yeah,
Okay.
Okay.
yeah, that's
Okay,
where
sure.
I showed it with the analysis. The street is,
So it talks about sitting on posts, but then it talks about a 6-block foundation.
Where does it
So-
say that? Oh, in the,
This hand-drawn thing,
That's
talks- and so that obviously,
what we had discussed about before the meeting is going with a post, that way we can put some tile lateral bracing into it easier, and then also have less impact. I did just tell them that I didn't allow for 16 inches wide, I only allowed for 12. So,
the problem is, the problem with me is I just know too much about floodplains. I mean, that's where I started doing FEMA flood mapping. And as you know, you're dealing with a regulatory floodway, not just the floodplain. Like the floodway, you don't do anything. You do not mess with a floodway. And it talks about in here, the 100-year BFE at section 4 goes up. Well, FEMA's got a strict rule. It is 0.00, no increase. And if you have any increase, you gotta go with the letter of map revision, which is a whole thing you don't wanna go to. So that's my only heartburn, that, if we're approving something that clearly shows an increase, even though it's a microscopic increase, FEMA, they're very clear, 0 increase. So that's just my 2 cents.
Scott, if I might, explain what that means in terms of what would happen to if the structure was, if we approved it, the structure was completed, what impact is that?
So what you're doing, you're just saying that during a flood event, if you build this house, technically, the elevation of the water, the pool of water that comes up, will be slightly higher when you build the house than it is now. Now, it's almost not measurable, but it is. And, the problem is if you, in all practicality, there's probably not an issue here. But if you did like 6 of them, the cumulative effect, who knows, it's gonna, affect somebody else's property. So that's the reason they don't want you affecting someone else's flood elevation, someone else.
Are we in a position, I guess, given what you're saying, in this situation, that there would be any other development around where that might be an issue?
well, I mean, there's an entire floodway that goes all the way to Mississippi that, eventually is, like you said, cumulatively impacted.
Really, this area, the whole problem and the floodway in this area is from the crossing under the railroad.
Yeah.
Like, that's the choke point, and that's why Main Street floods. If you get the railroad to let you put a bigger culvert in, we wouldn't even have any problems with the jail or anything else.
Well,
Like,
and the
you
drainage
can't get
basin,
them to
the
change.
drainage basin actually starts at Green Village on West Mill Road.
Yes.
Everything
That's
from
right.
Crestview, from Green Village, all of it down White's Mill. That's several hundred, if not thousands, of acres
It's a lot.
that drain down through here. I guess my only question is, there are provisions within the ordinance that allow for development within the floodplain, whether or not the ordinance itself is subject to federal guidelines.
So, now there's a difference between the floodplain and the floodway. Talking about the floodway.
Yes, sir. I guess there are provisions within our ordinance that allow for
So-
development within the floodway,
Right.
I may be mispronouncing
Per
something.
FEMA guidelines. Now, with that said, the building official is the steward of the floodplain for the locality. So the building official says, oh, you can raise the water a foot, I don't care, that's fine.
Okay, so as far as we're concerned though, if the application meets the guidelines, then subject to submittal to the building official with all of the details, then basically we check our box. Am I?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. My confusion was just, in my mind, I thought you were sticking it up on posts 2 feet, like a house at the beach or something.
Yeah.
And so if anything came up, it would
Flow under.
just go through like a flood vent or
Right,
something.
and
But
that is
then-
what we're doing.
That is what we're doing.
Okay,
But
because
then that goes back to where it says, no, it's a 6 block high foundation.
in which you're actually gonna be
Which-
backing water up.
So those 2 things, so I guess, if we were approving it, we'd have to say, okay, it can't have this block foundation impeding flow or something.
Yeah, no, my model is absolutely
Okay,
based on
okay.
post.
And the motion can say that if we make a motion to do that. One question I have is, if you're not right on the FEMA guideline, would that, I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, would that impact the ability to get flood insurance for the person who owns the home?
So FEMA doesn't have like a punitive branch, like they're not going out enforcing stuff. That's why they leave it to the building officials. But as far as the flood insurance thing, I don't know. I suppose if they found out, they could say, well, wait a minute.
You're gonna have to, if this is financed, you're gonna have to get flood insurance unless you get a LOMA, a letter of
Yeah.
map amendment,
Yeah,
which modifies.
yeah, which this can't be modified.
No.
You don't want to get into that. It's a bureaucratic red tape nightmare to change the maps.
Well, and just, they don't change the maps. They'll give you the letter. We had to get one out at the
Right, yeah.
lake, but they're not gonna change the maps.
It in effect changes the map by letter until the next
If
revision.
there's a mistake in their model, which I have done before, where it's clearly a mistake, then you can change the map, but
Yeah.
there's no mistake in this, and it looks very accurate, and it's matching my model exactly too.
All right, additional questions for Mr. Bundy?
So let me just make sure, I just want to say that just for the applicant, so if they approve it tonight, to be clear, they're saying that this foundation was sort of inaccurate on the drawing that was submitted to us versus what was the model, and then if they approve it tonight, there still is a process that you have to go through the building department with, and then as far as flood insurance, that is something separate from us as well, so I don't, that's an added thing, so, is that correct, what we've
Well,
done?
I think the point that Jeff's making is, if you're talking about doing this, if you go to the bank and you can't get flood insurance, if you're gonna
They're not
borrow
gonna
money,
finance.
you're done.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Well, they're gonna look at the BFE, the base flood elevation, and add 2 feet or whatever, so I would say that's what the insurance guys would go by, whatever the,
You can get
Flood
insurance,
management.
it's just, it's an additional cost.
It's expensive.
any additional questions, comments? Not, I'm gonna close the public hearing, and then see if there's additional discussion from the planning commission. Any additional discussion? If not, is there a motion?
In terms of other development around it, I think somebody asked, there's not really much else that can be developed around that. So we're not talking about cumulative effects otherwise.
Well,
I mean, I know they are in terms of beyond that particular location, but
I
in
mean,
terms
you've
of
got all
here,
that, you got all that empty territory down
You've
Black
got a lot of
Square
green
Lane,
space
so
right there.
if a guy comes in next year and wants to build one next door, well, he's got to put a precedent. Well, you approved that one, so.
How many other lots are there?
Well, the town actually owns a couple of lots here, so, I can pull it up on the GIS, but. I think I'm gonna say it's 3.
Yeah, I think it is.
Three,
The
like,
attorney owns it, I can't think of his name.
Like 3 more lots along there, yeah,
it's a 4 total, I think.
yeah. Let's see.
Seemingly, the town would have an interest in pretty much all of them down through there as a
Mhm.
detention basin or,
And we are
retention
currently
basin.
going through a whole flood study of that whole area, probably most of you know. That is all being studied right now. so.
Miss Evans, you want to sell the lot?
I spent so much money already.
All right. So yeah, I mean, there are quite a few places in town that do, as everyone knows, does have, that there is flooding, so, so yeah, let's see, so we have the lot that is currently owned here by Miss Evans. We have a lot here, that there was a structure at one time, that's just, there isn't one currently. And those 2 lots are owned together. Or, they actually own that, they own that one as well, and then these are both owned by the town of Abingdon. So there is one owner that owns this whole area.
When's the flood study supposed to be finished? Any idea?
I don't actually know the dates on that right now. Maybe, Ms. Quetch, do you know, or?
I know they just hired within the last month the firm to do it,
I
but
think the study's finished, isn't it?
And now we're looking at just like all the
Yeah.
acquisition and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was part of that East Main Street, the improvements.
We got the drawings and.
Okay, so the
yeah.
study I think is
Maybe.
complete,
The
but there is a
study's
process
complete.
now that we would have to go through to see which option. So there's a variety of options that were
Different
provided.
phases, different
Yeah.
phases.
Basins versus
Oh,
culverts
yeah,
versus
yeah.
land acquisition.
So there is, yeah, a study, okay, I know what you're
There's
talking about. There's a
phases.
study that was done, and it
Right.
had the recommendations.
Right.
And then within a month ago, they hired a firm for the East Main Street project, which dovetails into that, you know, where the
Yeah.
it floods across the road
Across
there.
the road.
So
Up
Yeah.
there.
it's tied in together. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking of.
Mhm.
All right, is there a suggestion as to how we should proceed, a motion or not?
hang on.
How do we want to proceed?
Well, I mean, I'm not adverse to making a motion to approve the application as submitted, subject to submittals, all appropriate submittals to the building official relative to the floodplain.
Okay. Is there a second?
Sure.
Okay, Mr. Weaver seconded. Any additional discussion? If not, if you would call the roll.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Weaver?
Aye.
Mr. Pennington?
Aye.
Mr. Wilson?
No.
And Mr. Schuman?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, motion is approved. The next order of business is the sign code resolution.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, Ms. Evans, the reason that I made the motion and what have you is I believe it complies with the ordinance as written. That doesn't mean that the town doesn't have a vested interest in possibly talking to you prior to any construction. I think that would be advantageous. And this is personal, you know, not, certainly don't mean to take this form, but projects of this nature, they comply with the ordinance, but long-term, I'm not sure they're really in the best interest of what the town is undertaking right now. So my suggestion would be, please communicate with the town relative to this property. That I think the town should have a vested interest in it for the betterment along all of this, the whole flood study. This area, all of that property does flood. And whether or not the town utilizes that as a retention or detention basin, anything of that nature, that's about the only property that has enough area. The one behind the old Exxon station really doesn't have sufficient. You know, so that, just a piece of advice, before you start anything, I would recommend that somebody from the town, Mayanna, whether it's the town manager, what have you, you all possibly sit down. It's your right, and the application fit the ordinance. But I think it would be beneficial, you know, for the town to sit down with you ahead of time. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, that's
Please.
fine. I think that's appropriate. All right, the next order of business is a resolution of the sign ordinance. And I think all that we have discussed is in the packet.
Yeah, so and if you're okay with this, I'm going to kind of give you an update on where we're at with it, and I'm not expecting a motion tonight. So, as you all know, we were approached by the Lamar Group for the billboard sign. They wanted to put digital billboards in town. So they gave us our presentation, and the Planning Commission said, well, let's check and see if the town council has any desire to do that. Meanwhile, we kind of opened the sign code because we said, well, if we're going to look at billboards, there's several other things that we'd like to look at as well. So we went through that whole process. At the last meeting, the Lamar Group basically came, you know, we brought this language and said, do you want billboards that are digital in town limits? And there was a resounding no from the Planning Commission. So we said to them, your answer is no. And so I took that language out, and you've got that here tonight. Well, they have now appealed that decision to the town council. And it is within their right. I think we're kind of talking about rights tonight. It is within their right to appeal that decision. So I basically put together, you know, a draft resolution to let you all know that we're moving forward. But I don't expect you all to go through an adoption process or, you know, a recommendation of a resolution to the town council, because I think we need one more no or yes. I'm not going to say it could be a yes as well from the town council before we move forward with this. And I know that there was a couple of edits that you all wanted still in this, and I have not done those yet either. So tonight was basically to let you all know where we're at with it, to know that there will be one more town council motion on their appeal, and just to bring you all in the loop. So, and if there were any other additional comments from anyone who may or not have been here last time, we can bring those up this time as well.
Oh, boy, you get to deal with it again.
Well, I'm not sure that there's enough interest for an appeal.
Yeah, and I mean, we can talk to CAM. They did submit their official letter within the 30 days, and so they do, based on the section of the code that allows for appeal, they're basically appealing your decision. And I will say that the other one that got appealed is the red color on the car wash.
Now,
So-
does that go to the town council, or, okay.
Yeah, so both of those are going to the town council, because in both of those, your decision was no, and so the town council now gets to deal with 2 appeals.
Really don't understand that. I mean, if you want the red color, then why buy property in an area where it specifically says you can't have the red color?
It's got plenty of red on it as presented, so,
You know,
and all their renderings at the job site show it brick
yep.
without being painted, so it looks fine to me.
Yeah, so it's just, we have 2 appeals right now. It's sort of an interesting time. So this was really just to let you know that we're still moving forward with this. When when we get the motion, yes or no from the town council, I'll go back to this and amend it and bring it to you at a future date. So
This is August 8th, right? August 8th?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Diana,
Yeah.
21-3-1A,
Mm-hmm.
if you'll flip over to the second page, number 4, roadway and safety signage.
Let's see.
Ensure that road crossings are,
Yeah, that's one that we caught last time. Yeah,
are what?
exactly. And then I think the
Okay.
yard sale signs was the other one. It needs to say must be removed upon the completion of the yard sale. So there's still a few edits that we need to make in this. That's why I basically just took the last one and put it in here, but we're not quite ready. I did take out the billboard signs, so you would know that it was happening, but,
Well, I felt, it was unfortunate that they came as many times as they came, but we did give them, I think, the opportunity to tell us everything they wanted to tell us, which is what we had asked, and I understand they're being less than thrilled with what we had to say.
Well, but was not part of the decision that we made that the comprehensive plan wasn't asking for that anyway? I mean, was there not?
Yeah, I mean,
So it goes back to the council that presented the,
well, and also, I think like with the appeal on the red color, they basically came with the brick the first time, and then they kept amending their request. And then, the last time they came, they said, well, we have to have the red color because it's part of how we advertise ourselves. And I was thinking, well, if that was the case, that was probably the case the first time they came. So, anyway.
Diana, the overlay area,
mhm.
do we have a detailed description of where that is, what properties fit within that?
Well, this is different.
Entrance
So you've got
corridor.
2 agreements. You've got the overlay,
Mhm.
and then you have a specific agreement between the town and the developer for the meadows.
Okay.
So you've got, the one that controls that is the specific agreement between the town and the meadows. And they made the point, the applicant, about what was done with PALs. But the agreement basically said everything had to be brick. Didn't mean you couldn't paint the brick. But in this case, they basically came with the idea of just the brick the first time, and then they kept modifying but there was a decision on PALs. PALs is brick, but it's painted. So and that's the point that they made is, well, this is part of how we identify ourselves, but, I think our decision was, if that was the case, that should have been the case when you made your original request, and it wasn't, so.
And the way that those 2 agreements work, basically the area that is Food City was originally part of the entrance corridor. And so because that whole parcel was, then it all relies on these 2 agreements. And that was a question that was asked because they're like, well, we don't front on, the entrance corridor parcels say you basically need to be on the entrance into town. But because otherwise there'd be no action to be taken by the planning commission for a parcel that's not in the entrance corridor.
Mhm.
So it is a bit confusing, but it's the original development that was in the entrance corridor.
Well, and one of the things that's truly confusing to people is that when the Meadows was originally proposed, it was on the whole thing was on the
Correct.
entrance corridor, so the original discussion had to do with the entrance corridor. And then once the development was approved, then there was this agreement between the town and the developer. And where Cook Street is not in the entrance corridor because doesn't front Cummings.
Yeah, I mean, the Meadows used to be 2 tracks. The front was 29 acres and the back was 43. Where the house was and everything back towards 81 was roughly 43, 70 total. All that was in the entrance corridor. Okay. but
Before we had to change the entrance corridor.
Okay. You changed the entrance corridor, and then it's now not in the corridor,
Yep.
but it's subject to an agreement
Between the town and the
One of my
developer.
questions was going to be if there's a conflict between the corridor and the agreement, which one prevails? But that's not the case here.
As I
because-
understand, it's not the case, because when we changed the entrance, originally, when there was this entrance corridor, we had all these roads like White's Mill Road and and what happened was there was a court case, I think, in Albemarle County, and Albemarle County had done the same thing, and the court said, no, you can't do that, because an entrance corridor basically has to be a main road. So
Okay.
some of our roads, like White's Mill Road, Walden Road, they were in there, but that was not appropriate. And see, when you come off of Cumming Street all the way over to where they are on Cook, that then became not part of the entrance corridor, but it was governed by the agreement between the town and the developer.
And that encompasses all 70 acres through there, as far as what is permitted, what isn't permitted.
Which is why we end up looking at their signs, even though it seems like, okay, these signs are interior to their development, why are we looking at them?
Okay.
So, I mean, yeah, if you would go back, that's an agreement like that probably, it's not super valuable. I would say that the other argument from the sign folks is the fact that they do have that huge sign right on Cummings. And so for our sign appeal, I'm sure that's part of their argument, because I met with them and the town manager, and their argument is that, yes, there is a digital sign there that Food City has. And we said, well, yes, but that was part of a project, that's not a billboard, that's not multiple billboards through town. So it is 2 different things, but again, that whole agreement does confuse the situation, because we go through a process that we really, shouldn't be going through if it hadn't originally been on the entrance corridor. So it does make it confusing.
It does.
Yeah.
So-
Especially with and it's not really, it's almost like the 2 pieces of code, which, I mean, I don't have them here tonight. It's not like they conflict as much as they're just looking at different things. So the agreement is more looking at like this natural color, and then the brick facade, it's like almost like they're looking at different pieces of the sign. And so if you mesh them together, yeah, it says it should be a brick building with muted colors. But you can also have like ephes and, some other things as well. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess because we looked to see who was on, was anyone on it when PALS came through? Were any of you?
I was.
You were? Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know looking at the minutes, I couldn't find what the determination of that color,
Well, I was.
how that was allowed.
I couldn't vote because, at the time,
Ah,
but, because I had a conflict, but the discussion was, and this is, to go back to the point about the entrance corridor, when the agreement with the developer was made, the entrance corridor at the time still encompassed the development. And what the agreement is, I had some problems with. I thought it was poorly drafted. That's just my view. And what happened with PALS was, PALS said, oh yeah, we're going to comply with the letter of the law. We're going to make it brick. But because that color is how we identify ourselves, then we're going to paint it. And there was a good bit of disagreement on that. But ultimately, my recollection is that when it came down to it, the Planning Commission really didn't have any argument that they couldn't do that. They started out that way. And there was a discussion, for example, well, does it have to be blue? Can it be beige? And the answer was no, it has to be blue because that's our logo.
That's the color.
Now, I think had the people with the car wash come in and showed us that that was their logo, and that's how all their other car washes were done, as opposed to how they approached us initially, we might have been in a different position, but that's not how it was done.
I guess the question I have, and I need to review the agreement, is seemingly it should be spelled out what is permitted and what isn't permitted. It shouldn't be subjective.
Well, and like I say, when you read the agreement, I think what you're gonna find is, I hate to say this, I'm not an attorney, I think it could have been drafted more
It
better.
doesn't
I
nail
thought,
things down very well.
Well, any ambiguity goes against the drafter, so whoever drafted it. And I'm assuming the agreement could be modified.
with
Yeah.
agreement,
But
although frankly, the only issue we've ever had has been PALs, because everybody else came in and did exactly what, you know, what was called for.
And I would think Food City would be driving a lot of that because those are those out parcels.
Well, and they were one of the drivers of the PAL situation.
Well, Powell's plainly said they wouldn't build if they couldn't paint it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's your answer. That's why it was approved ultimately.
Well, and again, the fact was that it was in fact brick. I think if the underlying building itself hadn't been brick that was painted, I think where the ambiguity was whether or not, once you had brick, that you could paint it. And I think that's, you know, at my recollection, and again, I was conflicted because at the time my company that I worked for we were a vendor for Food City. But my recollection is that the commission ultimately was told that it met the guideline as the guideline was drafted. And I don't know if that's your recollection, Scott, but that's.
I just read about it in the paper at
Oh.
that point. I wasn't involved.
I mean, I would think at some point this issue is gonna arise again. You know, so maybe it's something for us to take a look at to see if there's a way, if it's an agreement between the town and Marathon, KVAT.
It's probably Marathon, I'm guessing.
I would assume it's Marathon, that's who purchased the property.
Yeah.
You know, but with that also, there were public hearings.
Correct, so.
On that.
Yeah, and it's a bit, again, it's very odd that we're continuing as the planning commission to make motions on a private development after it's been done. In general, you would think that would happen one time, they would have their agreement,
Yeah.
and then they would be the ones who make the determination as to whether or not it can be brick, all brick, you know, so
Yeah.
that's what's created this oddity with us, because it does say that the planning commission has kind of the final say. So if they present us with a brick item and staff presents it to you and you say, okay, great, and then they say, well, we want to paint it red, it really is up to you to decide if that's a muted
Do
color.
they also submit something, I would assume they do, to
the
Marathon?
yeah.
Marathon?
I'm sure
As
they
the
do
developer?
before they're
Well-
purchasing it, so.
Let me say, I think that after PALs,
Steve doesn't want anything to do with it.
I mean, it was a mess and it made the paper and all that. When Marathon has come, everything, like I say, everything other than PALs and then has been brick. And, you know, you may ask the question about the 43 acres. If you notice, all the buildings on the
Yes, sir.
are brick. And again, that was part of the deal.
It's arisen at every point. I mean, Eastman came back a couple times.
Yeah.
The city had to obviously make alterations to everything that they've done in there. I mean, it's at every
Well,
every parcel it's been.
Eastman came back because technically it says things are supposed to be colonial.
Mhm.
And I remember, who was it, Rick Humphreys or whatever, was like, that's not colonial, sorry. You know how Eastman has that corporate identity
Yep.
of it's like a lodge or something. And so that was a
Well,
problem.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're correct, it poorly drafted.
Well, like I say,
Multiple
take a look,
interpretations.
because because that was my feeling, and one of the, after the fact, somebody said something to me about PALs that had been involved in the agreement. I said, well, the agreement said, and the guy said to me, well, but that's not what we meant. And I said, well,
It is up to the planning commission. The planning commission has the right to even stray from the ordinance. You know, so I mean, there are outs, so to speak, if this body felt compelled. But with that said, everything that's up there, the ball fields and what have you, I think are first class. And I mean, they are something to behold.
well, one of the things, and I say this, one of the things that originally Food City wanted to do was to build the, you know, what they own. They're renting like where Hallmark is,
Yes,
as
sir.
an offshoot of the building, almost like a V. And there was objection to that, but in terms of safety and the ability to put awnings and so forth, that probably would have been better. But what they ended up with was not their design. That was more design that came from public hearing in the town. But I would invite you to read
Okay.
to read the ordinance.
The guidelines for that, that development are comically short. Like, I expected like a 30-page document or something. It's like 3. There's like almost nothing in it.
I read it. That surprises me. I mean, because just like you said, everything from the berms, you know, to shield anything from the creeper trail, how everything is landscaped, you know, the lights, and strictly directed downward to where there is no light pollution, anything of this nature. There were details in there that sounds like we're missing in a lot of other areas.
If you look at down there where the higher ed center is in the Frenchmore Boulevard, that
Yes, sir.
development, the guidelines are like this, that
Mhm.
talks about all trees and plantings and berms, and you name it, it's in there. It's pretty ironclad.
Well,
I
like-
didn't mean to, I'm sorry.
no, that's
I
okay,
didn't mean
because,
to
because we
start.
probably will end up seeing something more on this. Any other old business not on the agenda? Before we get to adjournment, because we have the meeting at 6, one of the questions that I think we may need to discuss a little bit is, we're going to have people in this meeting who may or may not have something to say. How are we going to deal with what comes out of the meeting? Or should we, as a matter of course, begin the meeting by saying, if you have comment, we want that to be in written form? I
So
mean-
the Berkeley group's gonna run the meeting. They're down there getting ready, I think. They're gonna run the meeting, and they've got a survey that they're handing out to people to fill in if they wanna fill it in tonight, or they've got a QR code if somebody wants to go on digitally. So once we're done with the meeting, or there's gonna be a discussion time in there, you know, Berkeley group's gonna start with a general presentation of what they've done. Then there'll be a discussion time where people can say their things, or then they can fill out a form, or they can go on after. Then we're gonna open that survey up for the next few weeks as well. One thing I was gonna say along those lines, I didn't know if you guys wanted to set a specific time to do another workshop. I haven't gotten any more comments other than your original email, but I'm sure there's other comments, although now that we have a public draft, you might want to
Well,
look at
that's
that
what-
instead, so.
But should we say in this meeting, or have the Berkeley group say, that if you have comment beyond the survey, that it needs to be in writing?
Sure.
My concern is
Mhm.
that somebody's gonna say something, they're gonna consider that they made a statement, we may not know, or that may not be recorded, so, you know.
We can hand it to, we can
So-
hand them the survey right down there. It's only 2 questions, like, do you have any comments, so,
So,
yeah.
when we did these informational meetings for like Park Street, we did them at the
Mhm.
fire station, and they were recorded.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these guys, the tech guys
Mm.
just set up the mics, and so
That's
you can go
interesting.
back and hear
That
what
might be a
people
good idea. Can
are
they
saying,
record
but
it?
I don't know if you can do it at this late.
I don't know if we can do it at this late. So just like when people were walking around, you could hear them talking, or
Oh,
just
yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
meeting.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
they
it's-
recorded
we're
it,
on
and then we
now.
did
They just
one at
leave
the
it on.
senior center over there off Summer Street, and they
Mm.
did it there too.
Well, let's see how it goes. I don't know how many people are gonna show up. I feel like the Berkeley group should be able to collect the comments, but,
Usually.
Like I say, my only concern is that somebody's gonna say, I made a comment
yeah.
and it wasn't addressed. And to me, I would say if you have any comment beyond this
Mhm.
meeting or beyond the survey, it needs to be submitted
Sure,
in writing.
that sounds good. And we'll have the forms down there. We have a stack of them, so.
I'm
Yeah.
just,
And
I
our
just don't
purpose
want
is
to
not-
ignore anybody and then say, if somebody come back and said, well, gosh, I don't like X or Y.
Right, right.
But is our purpose tonight with the back and forth, or is our purpose simply listening to what is presented?
Well, this isn't like a hearing,
No.
so it's just informational.
Mhm.
So if they have a problem with it that's not necessarily addressed, they can, there's
Mhm.
gonna be public hearing ultimately.
Correct, yep.
So
A whole
I'm
series
not
of public
too worried
hearings.
about,
Mhm.
getting everything down, but those consultants are usually pretty good about
Mhm.
recording notes of whoever says what and reporting
Yeah.
back.
So get back to your, my answer point, do we want to schedule a work session? I think it would probably be a good idea.
I would like to try to go through as best I can what's presented, the draft.
Mhm.
Because previously we had some concerns over
Mhm.
different areas, different square footages, things of this nature that were commingled, so to speak. I think an opportunity to do that before, a work session.
Well, now
Or
that,
maybe that would be the purpose of the work session.
Yep.
this draft has, in its footnotes, it notes where there were changes.
Okay.
So, I think, one thing I noticed in my reading of this,
Mhm.
as opposed to what we had done previously,
Mhm.
is there are certain things jumped out at me where there was a discussion of one thing. A good example in the Historic Preservation Board. As you go through it, there was a suggestion that the Preservation Board should be involved in dealing with properties that had deteriorated. Now, that was not in the list of charges, so I thought if you're gonna deal with it, it needs to be there. And my point is that when you read through this, sometimes it doesn't seem to fit. And so I suggested that because when you look at what the code officer looks at whether a building is blighted. But in the old historic district, blight is, it's got to be pretty bad to be blighted, but deterioration is a different discussion. And so I thought it was important, just the way that was done, to make sure that the Historic Preservation Board could come to somebody and say, look, we've got these guidelines and we have these ordinances, and your building doesn't.
Well, and see, that gets back to the exact conversation we're having. These need to be objective to where they're measurable.
Yep.
And they're not subjective.
Well, and-
And it's, here's what it is, here's what you need to meet, and in that way, everybody understands. And then the town has to have the authority, the town has to have the direction and then the authority, to enforce them. But just like you're saying, everything needs to be tied in together, whether it's the planning commission and the HPRB, the guidelines need to work together.
Well, and I thought it was important to say that that's governed by the ordinance. There was a paragraph in there that was so subjective, I suggested taking it out. But I felt like that was important, but I also felt like, for example, deterioration versus blighted, because for something to be blighted, it's gotta be pretty bad.
Well, that in and of itself, yeah, I'm sure you could go to Black's Law definition, Webster, or something of that nature and get it, but that needs to be fairly clear.
Right.
As to what does this mean?
Right. No, I agree with that, and I think we need to draw a distinction in the old historic district as to what is deteriorated versus what is basically blighted or what's fallen down. I mean, one of the things is, there's an incredible amount of detail you have to go through to tear down a building that's historic. But yet, there's almost nothing to talk about deterioration. And, you know, so I thought that was important. The other thing was, and it gets to the flood zone, you know, where it had 19 different things in the flood zone that were the responsibility of basically Miana's office. And I was sitting there thinking, you got to be able to make that somewhat simpler.
Yes, sir.
I mean,
And a big thing that I would like you all to look at is if you see something like that we don't have a definition for, that you mark it. So you just said two things. You said blighted, you said deteriorated.
and
If they're not defined, then it's gonna be real hard for us. But if they're defined, then it becomes easy. So
Well-
if you see any, that's like as you read through it, that's what I would really
Okay.
be hopeful for.
blighted is not in this document.
And so, yeah,
But deteriorated is, and it is not defined.
there you
So
go.
we-
Yep,
So
exactly.
just, we
Yep.
need to make sure that is defined. But blighted is not, I don't know where those, I guess it would be, you know, different ordinance as to blighted and, you know,
Yeah, and so the town of Abingdon has adopted the property maintenance code, which kind of sits over here separate. It's kind of like the building code sits over here, the property maintenance code sits over here, the fire prevention code sits over here, and so blighted and those types of things, those words do come out of that. So it is a little bit different
yeah,
and probably
but-
should stay
But
separate.
deteriorated does need to be defined, and I
Yep.
don't know that it is. I
Okay.
don't think,
Yeah, I mean, if anything that we think needs a definition, let's get a definition, because that saves you in the long run.
no, it's
Yeah.
not. So
No.
that word does need to be
Okay.
defined.
One other thing I just thought of, I don't know if you remember in that workshop we talked about people submitting site plans, and I was adamant that it be formal. Well, you saw tonight, and there's a box penciled in there,
Mm-hmm.
28 by 32.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a site plan. Didn't show where it was on the, compared to the floodplain. And they really,
Hopefully, eventually we'll have
Yeah.
a measured site plan so you can see what's going on there.
Well, I mean, they're gonna have to have for building permits and things.
But I think it would have helped us immediately to have it on there, and it would show the floodway, it would show the floodplain. it
And I
would show
want to
everything.
say that one of the things that I added to that effect, I haven't looked at it in a while because I kind of want to wait till they give me a draft that has additional changes, is that I put in that a site plan had to be drawn by a designer, a license, there's a selection of things of who could do it, but it has to be done by
Yeah.
somebody and not just
Yeah.
on a napkin.
Registered
So,
engineer,
yeah,
land surveyor.
exactly.
Planner.
Right. So that
Landscape
as far as I
architect.
remember, I did add that in.
Okay.
I haven't looked recently, but all of, I mean, those are the exact things that I want to hear, because,
Yeah, that definition, I don't know if you want me to follow up, but that deterioration needs to be in here.
perfect, yes. And you can feel free to send me an email.
Okay.
If you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're reading this, and you can send me as many as you'd like, 'cause it's all helpful in the end.
I'll take, just as a kind of a side note to what we do, we went through all that with Abingdon Olive Oil Company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they have a sign. It is not either one of the signs
Nope.
we approve. And they went through that about the fact that they had to put the
Fence.
guard around their
Mhm.
waste area. That's not been done.
No, if they're not, they don't even, this is on the record, so hopefully, They, we also have some issues with their building permits and stuff, so their project is not complete yet, at all.
But
That sign is a temporary sign, the one out front.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're doing a lot of repairs. They found some stuff after they were getting into stuff for repairs,
Yeah.
and that's why we've allowed the temporary sign for them to have something to show that they're there. But as soon as those repairs are done, that sign goes up, that temporary one comes down.
Yeah.
We have an email saying.
Oh, okay.
So-
Yeah, so they're taking a little bit longer than they thought.
so
actually.
they bought it, they bought an old house and found out that that's what
Yeah.
happens when you buy an old house. Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir.
You believe- I tell you, my wife's grandmother at one time, after we bought our house, came and looked at it, and she shook her head and she said, you know, a long time ago, I bought an old house, and she said, and we worked on it, and we added to it, and we did all this stuff to it, and she said, you know what we had when we finished? And I said, no, ma'am. She said, an old house. Well, I guess if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn. Well, do we want to set a date for the meeting?
I mean, we can just come at I mean, we could have a work session prior to the next meeting. Sometimes it seems like you all are interested in that versus another night during the month, but you let us know.
What do you, just do it mid-afternoon?
Okay.
I think you
Is
said
that okay?
4:30 was hard for you.
Well, I mean, sometimes the afternoon meetings are difficult for those that, with all due respect, those that are still working.
No respect.
That's it.
Oh, wait, no, you're paying for my retirement.
That's it.
No,
With notice, can move some things around, but, no, whatever the pleasure of the commission is.
I mean, I'm fine for having it another night. It really is what everybody wants to do.
Well, we have town council on the 8th, so it couldn't be the 8th of August. So you're looking at, I guess, the 15th or the 22nd, because our next meeting will be the 29th, or will it be the 22nd? I mean, it's really up to you all. We're available.
Does it need to be on a Monday?
It does not, but we have HPRB on a Wednesday, so we can't really pick a Wednesday since we often have more than one meeting with them, so
And Tuesdays and Thursdays are,
they're open.
I'm out of town after Wednesday until the 10th, but after that, pretty much, any day is all right with me.
The 18th's not good for me. I've got finance and council work session.
What if I sent out a Survey Monkey and you
Okay.
guys took a look at a
Yeah.
couple days? I know it's hard at these meetings to really,
Okay,
does that sound good?
yeah.
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Is there anything else we need to discuss? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're done. All right.